We're good? All right. Hi, my name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with Steve and Kelley Styring. We're at Styring Vineyards. It's August 2nd, 2019. Thank you both for joining us today. We appreciate this. Let's start with the important question. Why wine?
Do you want to take that one or do you want me to?
You can take most of them. I'll fill in.
Okay, so in 2000 we had our second child, and we were what I would call cubicle workers in North Dallas, Texas. And we felt that we had everything we ever aspired to in life. We had great jobs, beautiful children, beautiful house, great cars, and we were miserable. And we felt guilty I felt guilty for feeling so miserable about that and the choices that we had to make between work and family life. And so we actually started looking for a broader solution to that dilemma versus specifically wine at that point. And so we considered a few different options, most of them home-based family businesses that would allow us to no longer choose between work and family because it would be one thing. We already knew that we worked well together. We'd worked well together in the past. And so we looked at several options. We spent 2 years traveling. We looked at bed and breakfasts in Vermont. We looked at marinas in Maryland. And then we came here on what I thought was a wine tasting vacation, but turned out he had a bigger plan. And so in the next couple of weeks, we met viticulture experts, realtors, and winemakers in the region, wine tasting. We had our 2 kids in tow. They were 2 and 6 at that time. And I fell in love hard with this area and with the people I met and with the beauty of the life that we could have here with our kids. And so that was kind of the beginning. That was not the original, 2001. And so it wasn't the first encounter though with wine. Can you tell them a little bit about your experience at Dutch Henry?
Oh yeah. So we get this question a lot in the winery. So the answer we often use is that we were great wine tasters before we were wine makers, right? And that's kind of an important thing. And it's especially important now because that was a broad base of expertise prior to what is somewhat narrowed because we drink so much of our own wine and taste so much of our own wine today. We don't have as much of a broad base, I think, as we used to when we were younger and tasting all over the place.
We never get out.
But so I worked for a company out of Silicon Valley, and they sent me to the Silicon Valley area quite a bit for training, and I had clients I would go there with, and over a weekend there as much as possible, and take myself up into Napa Valley and Sonoma and those areas and taste. And one morning I ended up there early on a Sunday morning, and I was speaking to, I believe it was a brother-sister owner combo at Dutch Henry, and they asked me on the spot if I wanted to volunteer that morning and just work a little bit with them, and it was a wonderful thing. Turns out we were racking wine either 2-barrel or from barrel, I can't remember, but I had the racking one side, and it was just a glorious day. So golden retriever, throw the ball for the dog, rack some wine, throw the ball for the dog, beautiful weather. And that was, I think that was in the very late 90s. And then my company sent me here in 2000 for a large systems conference because we built our large systems, and I was a large system architect. We built them over in Hillsborough. So my company at the time brought in all of us, all the large systems engineers, once a year in July. So, I showed up here on the scene in July and from Dallas. So look at the different, weather combinations. Early July here versus early July
in Dallas. And how beautiful it is here.
How beautiful it was. So fast forward to July 2001, we came back on a family vacation. And it was a family vacation, and it was also, let's check out the whole state and see what's going on. And we fell in love, so.
Right, and so through that process, we ended up on, I think it was probably a Tuesday evening it was right at closing time, it was around 5 o'clock, that we wandered into Laurel Ridge. And David Tepla, the founder of Laurel Ridge, was pouring behind the bar. and no one else was there. And we show up with our 2 shaggy kids, and we're kind of tired. And so the kids, I
They're
think,
always tired
are
that
always
trip.
tired that trip. Because
We covered so much.
and we did. We
Always.
went to so many wineries, and we're checking it out. And so, in fact, our daughter at one point goes, "Not another winery, no." So anyway, we kids are on David's sofa enjoying some crackers, and we're tasting. And Steve says to David, he says, "If I could do what you're doing, I would quit my job tomorrow." And David said, "What's stopping you?" And he locked the doors, and we stayed for 3 hours, and we went through the whole business.
Wow.
And Steve left with an offer to apprentice with him, which is fancy talk for work for free, making
You know.
their wine
mine.
and ours. And so in 2003, March of 2003, he began that process. And so, and that lasted for 2 years. David had terminal cancer, and so he was in OA passing on his gift. And I don't know if you want to add any details.
No, David was just wonderful, and the Tepler family in Laurel Ridge.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't thank them enough. He was very gracious with his time and very gracious with his knowledge.
Right.
I can remember when we first came up here, we brought our barrels up in, I think it was 05, I'm not
05,
quite
yeah.
sure, but we were still in barrel in 04, so we brought our barrels up here, and we brought our 04 up here in barrel.
Right.
And I said to Kelley, I said, you know, it's early, I could stay down there for easily another 5 years.
Right.
I was having, you know,
Right.
a really wonderful time down there, and
Yeah.
David was an awesome person to be around, so it was kind of sad.
Right.
for us.
So when he passed, then, so going back actually, so we actually signed paperwork on the farm late '02. Steve, we bought it online, unseen, to be honest. So we had made 6 trips out between the 2 of us over the ensuing few months, narrowing the scope of where we wanted to be based on wines that we enjoyed, based on schools. So I visited every elementary school in Yamhill County. That was one of my trips. And I stayed in the Oregon hotel, which was pretty weird and fun. And just kind of got narrower and narrower, which actually frustrated him a little bit. He's like, "You're boxing me in, it's too small, I need to be able to look in different areas." And then this land came up for sale. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, as Kelley said, we actually bought the place sight unseen. We were searching, so we had the family vacation 2001. Throughout that, basically post-family vacation, we activated the search, right? So it would have been, I don't know, September 2001. And sometime in 2002, I can't remember the exact timing, we had contacted the realtor, we were working with the realtor, we'd taken a couple trips out to work with the realtor, and she was looking for property for us throughout 2002. A number of trips out, checking out schools, trying to really narrow down where the property was going to be. And the realtor is also in the industry too, but at the time she was a realtor. She showed up on this property with her cell phone. It was early in the morning here. It's like, well, let me rewind one step. The property did come up online. And I caught the listing of the property the day it came out. I think it was even the hour it came out on my computer. And I called the listing agent. She was at dinner here in Oregon. I don't know what I was doing, whatever, in my office in Dallas, right? So dispatched my realtor, the one that we were working with, on the very next morning. So she came out here at about 7:30, and I can hear the enthusiasm for the property in her voice. So signed everything up, escrowed the money away, took a huge risk. There was one contingency in the contract that I show up here within 3 days and make a decision for the family that we were going to move here and buy this property. So I believe I showed up on day 2, and at that point all I had to say was, because everything was completely done. I mean, everything was signed.
Right.
All the money was transacted, and all we had to do was say yay or nay within 3 days. And
So he
that's what we
calls
did.
me in my office in Dallas, and he says, "You own a farm in Oregon." It's like,
We bought the family
I
farm.
have to quit my job and move. Like, I had no idea. I mean, I think we had an idea, but it was a little, it became very real in that moment. that we were going to quit our jobs and that we were going to move ourselves for the first time. We've been corporate workers for so long, it almost felt like being in witness protection, where we packed up our stuff and in our Bronco, our white OJ Bronco,
Yeah, what OJ Bronco.
which we did drive 40 miles an hour on the 405 just for fun when we went through LA.
when we came
just
here.
for fun. Yeah.
We slowed it way
Which they're
down.
too young to know that joke, but
It hits
That's our
home. It
side
hits
of
home
the-
well
that's
for
our
me,
side
though.
of the coin, I
Appreciate that.
But yeah, so we rolled in the driveway in
March.
March 03, March 8th,
03.
2003. And at that point, there was a rodent and bird infested 5-bedroom mobile home on that gravel parking lot.
there.
There was a metal ag shed full of cigarette butts and,
And a fire
beer
ring.
cans and a fire ring, so people have
Fire
been having
pit.
some parties in there. And then the manufactured home that we still live in.
Which was the home
actually very
when I
nice.
was here. I called you. I said that, right?
Yeah.
So as the homes go in Dallas, they're pretty large. They're not well built, honestly.
Yeah.
But they're,
It's a McMansion.
there's a lot of
Yeah.
space. So we were, needless to say, in a bigger home there than here. But when I came out to look at this property, I remember calling you saying,
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll like this home.
And surprisingly, I really did. I was like, this is going to sound horrible, but I can vacuum from one outlet. I'm in. Really. The amount of space in Dallas, it just increased your maintenance and your everything. Everything gets, when things get bigger, everything gets bigger. And I thought, well, this is going to be much more authentic to how we were raised. This is
It
going to
has
be,
always seemed like a home.
yeah,
more
it has
than
always
anywhere
seemed
else.
like a home, not a house. And so we're still living in that, and happily so, because that has enabled us to self-fund everything that's here. So without investors and large debt, we've been able to build a piece at a time, everything that you see. And that adds to that, so that family kind of, I guess, how did I say it? It's kind of like if you clean sheet your life and start over, you bring into it all of your best qualities and all of your worst qualities, and they're often exactly the same quality, right? And so one of them was this aggressiveness that I think we had learned through corporate success comes with a certain amount of aggressiveness. And so by taking a step back, and actually in the first couple of years we were fairly aggressive. We finished the first small building. We were getting ready to open. We were looking at wholesale accounts. We were really working hard toward that. And we pulled back a little bit because we said, wait a minute. We're going to make this look just like that other life. That's not why we came here. And so we've proceeded very slowly on this path, which is sometimes frustrating, I would say. As you look around you and you see the growth of others on a faster path. But a lot of that has been by choice, because coming here wasn't about quickly building a big successful business. It was never about that. If we were going to do that, I'd probably just stay in Dallas because it's a great place to have a business, right? But it was more about building an authentic life that was home-based, that was family-centered. So as the kids grew,
Healthy.
they were healthy. As the kids grew, they were a big part of what we do here. And I think that's worked out for the most part. So there were 3 kind of convergent or parallel activities that started that March of 03, or 4, I guess. One was the apprenticeship. 2 was planting the first 5 acres. 3 was
March of 03 is when we got here.
March of 03. I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? Okay. Then building the wine barn, what we call the wine barn, where we're still making wine today. And then getting the family settled, like learning to sleep again, putting our kids in public school, which was awesome. Spending time in the classroom, being here when they got home from school, which was amazing. Their school day was cut by 4 hours, and then Jillian, our youngest, we brought home from daycare. So she went to daddy's school for 2.5
And Laurel
years.
Ridge.
Mostly at Laurel Ridge, right? In the back of the Bronco, yeah. So she would go to Vineyards with you and meet. And so we taught her a couple of fun party tricks too. It was awesome to take Jillian when she was 2 or 3 years old to a vineyard, because she would grab a handful of soil and walk up to Steve and go, "Dad, this is great soil." Like she's nothing about soil. We taught her to do that because people were like, what is that? So, kids are so fun. I forget what the other one was. I don't remember. But those are some of the fun things when you have little kids out here. The cool thing about water is the universal solvent. That was the other one. Daddy, water is the universal solvent. Like, what? That was
Party
it.
trick?
Yeah.
Yeah. 3-year-old.
Yeah. It's also fun to
participate
mess
in.
with other people's kids too. So we gave a friend of ours a Pez dispenser, but we taught her it was called a Dagnabbit because we knew she'd lose it at some point, and then she'd be harassing her parents. Like, where's my Dagnabbit? Where's my Dagnabbit? And her parents were like, I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's horrible, right? You can keep that or edit it. I don't care. So
That's how we arrived.
let's talk about the kids for just a minute because they've been a pretty important part of everything that we've done here, and because they were a lot of the motivation for doing it. So our son, Colin was 7 and Jillian was 3 when we actually rolled in the driveway in 03.
Just turned. She's whatever the year
She's a
is.
2000 baby, yeah. And so starting with just farm life, I think. So in the first year, another project was 1 linear mile of fencing. So we have deer fence around 17 of the 40 acres of the farm. That keeps yeah, really. And so as soon as that was completed, they had and even before that, they had a degree of freedom they never had before. So when you're living in a giant suburb in a big city, you can't just let your kids run down the street. I know we used to do that when we were kids, but that's not the life we live right now. But we were at the bottom of Ribbon Ridge Road on that very first trip when he was 6, Colin was 6, and he's like, let me out, let me out. And he got out of the rental truck and he ran up the road in front of the truck because he just wanted to run, right? And so we pretty much turned him loose out here, especially when we had the fence, and then a year later when we had a dog. The rule was, there were only a few, not very many rules, because we think if you have principles, you don't need a lot of rules. So they basically knew how to behave, but the simple rules were, stay inside the fence and take the dog. And you can go anywhere you want, come back before dark, and any living things that you capture must be released at dark. Those are the only rules, right? So if you capture something, you can't keep it and starve it. You have to let it go at dark when it's dark. So salamanders and snakes and all kinds of stuff came home, and they were the dirtiest, filthiest little kids for a couple of years.
The first snake that he caught, I said, hey, hold it like this, it won't bite you.
The first snake, he totally Steve Irwin'd it, and it didn't fit him pretty hard. But it wasn't a huge snake. So
it's biting me and it hurts.
Yeah. Doctor, it hurts when I go like this. Yeah. So that was really a fun transformation for them. And then just learning how to sleep and, be more authentic and be healthier. And so that coincided
You said it twice now, learning how to sleep. It's really important to note that the nighttime noise here is completely non-existent, except for the coyotes every now and then.
Right.
Compared to a suburb or wherever,
Even the
any other
daytime
place
noise.
besides here. It's really very quiet here.
Yeah.
And it's different. It's different when you're sleeping in something that's, absolutely quiet.
Right. And the stress was not
great.
necessarily less, but different. We felt like we had more agency in what we were doing and what our future might be. And so that can help you sleep better, and that can keep you up some nights because you're responsible for everything. But I love it. I love being responsible for our own success or failure versus at the mercy of others. So I think that's worked out.
The running boy, both of them have gone on to be high school champions in track.
Yeah.
Jillian and Colin in pole vaulting, but the running boy went on to be actually a state champion in the
Running.
4x, what was it, the 4x400?
4x400.
4x4. So in his junior year, he took state championship with 3 other boys on his team.
And he's training for a marathon right now.
Yeah, as a state champion. So,
so that
it's kind
running
of a fun
thing
thing, right? It's
real.
a fun story.
Yeah.
We couldn't stop him from running when we came here on vacation and when we were shopping for properties
just
early
couldn't
on.
wait
and he
to
just,
get out.
so like Forrest, he kept running.
Had to unleash him on the property.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The other influence that they had around here, in addition to a lot of help with winemaking, because it's useful to have strong, small people who can get inside tanks and love to run a pressure washer, and they're like, here, scrub that tank, okay, and they it's great. And they climb up and down ladders with a great agility, which is cool too, in the cellar when you're topping and stuff like that.
And on the occasion when we did get out, and when we do get out, when you have a driver teenager that's not able to drink yet, that's another funny one.
Really nice.
You have a big designated driver.
You have a DD. You may be gripping the
You have an
armrest on your
absolute
chair, but,
baked-in
you know,
designated driver.
we learned that from some friends of ours. But the other thing is that they are classical guitar players, and so they started when they were 4 and 5 years old, and so by the time they were teenagers, they're very, very skilled and would entertain here regularly when we had guests. So that became a big part of what we do. Our daughter also plays acoustic and sings too, and she's recorded.
Yeah, Jillian started performing for our customers here at 6th grade. I don't know what age that is, but 6th grade.
11.
And then they both started performing earlier on. So they both started performing around, Colin was a little older, like 7, because he was older when we got here. Jillian started performing around 6 or 7
Yeah.
for our guests, classical music.
Right.
Then Jillian started singing for our guests in 6th grade. And they both went on to continue playing classical music for our guests too.
But it
So
was
that's
always
what
fun. Oh, there's a yellow jacket. It was always fun to watch the guests' faces because they're young, and so the expectations are, oh, this will be quaint, and then they just
Like, whoa.
they're really skilled.
One of the earlier, I don't think it was the first magazine, but one of the earlier
It was the very first issue of
of
1859,
1859 features Colin and his guitar.
playing guitar for guests. Yeah, that was pretty neat.
That was the first issue. Wow,
That
cool.
was the inaugural issue of the magazine. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see a picture of him with his classical guitar.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. So they, they've now are adults, so they're no longer here for the moment. But they were a really big part of that initial work because that's why we did this. You know, if we didn't approach it, for better or worse, I don't think we approached it aggressively as a business. We approached it from the standpoint of, we're going to create a beautiful life here. This business is going to support that life. It's going to be central to that life. It's our purpose and what we do, but it's not necessarily, I just didn't approach it, me anyway, I didn't approach it from the standpoint that this is going to be a huge business because I never really wanted to run a big business. I was doing that already. That's what I wanted to not do.
The wines similarly follow suit. I'm going to interrupt you because it's
please.
pretty fun
Fun fact.
segue. The wines similarly follow suit, right? We've always said that we're going to create wines that we love to drink, and it takes the pressure off.
Right.
We love to drink them, and if other people love to drink them too, well, then that's great. They
We'd be
can
delighted if you
participate.
take it home. We used to
Yeah.
tell people, but if you don't, we've got 8 years of drinking in the cellar.
Exactly. That's where I was going.
I think it's
our
more
very
than that
first
now.
vintage year in 2003. We ran the calculator, and if we looked at our daily consumption, and we used our 2003 for our daily wine, then it would have taken us 8 years. To
Yeah,
sell.
I think we've exceeded that a little bit.
Yeah,
We
that-
might need some fronts.
We had to stop calculating somewhere around 2005 or 6. It didn't make sense anymore.
Right.
This vineyard, the first 5 acres that we planted, started yielding fruit in 2006.
Right.
And that was great. But when the second half of the vineyard grew in, and now we're at 10.5 acres planted, it's a whole different ballgame now. You know, so there's a little bit of
Right.
seriousness involved with that, just in the scale of the vineyard. Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So you put the first 5 acres in '03.
Yeah, so laid out, so as Kelley mentioned, March of '03, we put the fence in and then went to work, and basically I went to work in clearing the fields, which was very difficult to do because, well, not difficult, time consuming and somewhat difficult. Every morning I'd wake up and in our kitchen down there, down the road, we have a solar bubble, plastic bubble. Every single morning, March and April, wake up and you hear the rain on it. It's like, okay, not
Is it
today.
raining?
You need 3 days really to clear and plow out at a minimum. Because you got to work on it a day, then you need another dry day to do a little bit more work, another dry day to do a little bit more work. You really need 3 dry days. And in 2003, we didn't get 3 consecutive dry days. It was hard to find them. So it was really, really difficult to get 5.5 acres cleared for our first planting that had been moved into cold storage because we just couldn't get the land clear. And we also moved here and we also started with the apprenticeship. We started doing all that all at once.
Right.
So it was quite a pylon. It was a fun pylon to have. But it was a pylon. The weather just wasn't participating. So we got the first 5.5 acres finally planted in middle of May. We had 2 light rainstorms after that. Not even a storm. Light rains after we planted first 5.5 acres. And we're at roughly 900 plus vines per acre out there. So we got those in, got them all in. First time in our life we've ever done that.
It was exciting.
And then the water shut off. It stopped. I mean, nothing. We didn't get this in July. No anything. Look at the weather patterns for summer of 2003. And you'll see the rain shut off in May and came back, I think it was the end of September, right? And part of our large investment we had just put in the ground. So it was a kind of a lucky thing for us that we really did put a lot of energy into coming up with fancy soils to put our vines into. So they came out of dry storage. We clipped the vines, shaved the roots a little bit because it's typical practice to do that. Put them in the 4-inch hole and moved sort of muddy dirt back over the vines. And then that was it, right? So we're a dry farm. So throughout that summer, we had to take the tank out there and wand a little bit of water on each plant. But without that, and if we had used fancy soil, those plants would have burned up. And there was a local example of that happened at the time where they were putting and using fancy compost, I don't know, with mushroom compost or whatever they had concocted. It's like, wow, that's really, really cool. We don't have that. We have just dirt. It turns out that just dirt right here worked to our advantage. We had about a 5% fallout rate in our first 5.5 acres, which is nice. That's pretty low. Especially considering the drought conditions that we had to work with. I mean, the summers in Oregon are so dry to begin with, but 2003 was just really extra dry, and we had a couple of 100-degree days in there too.
That's tough.
So yeah, but unfortunately for a neighbor, they used the fancy soil and they didn't have any water available, so it was too late by the time they caught up with it.
Right, the heat, the combustion.
But we got. We did very well with that first planting. The second planting happened in October of 07, which was another 5 acres. And we didn't do so well there, but for a totally different reason. So we planted 5.5 acres October of 07. And the plants, you allow, it's called two budding, right? You allow your plants to grow up so high, and you don't let them set it. They're typically not tall enough to set any grapes at all. At the end of the year or the beginning of next year, you cut them back so they 2 bud out, they come back up. The third year, depending, going to do the same. So we had 4 summers before we allowed that first harvest to set. Planting in 03, farm in 03, farm in 04, farm in 05, farm in 06. And at the end of 06, we got, 30% crop. It was very, very low tonnage, and that's very, very typical. Right, but the second 5 acres, October 07, farm in 07, farm in 08. At the end of 08, the plants were only so tall, let's say, just roughly this tall. Winter of 08, we had a snow that was this tall, a snowstorm that was this tall, and an ice block that was this high. So during the winter of 08, as the snow melted, that ice block came down and smashed the plants down to the ground because the plants, again, were under that. And they snapped at the graft.
Cracked the graft.
So this 4 acres and our 1 acre over there, the 1 acre over there fared very well because that was Riesling and that grew faster. So the Riesling had a little bit of the tip just above the snow and ice. So as the snow came down, it was great. Over here, just 40% fallout around here. So, so it, kind of all, I think in general, it sort of evens out. We didn't quite have the fallout of our neighbor, but it was still painful, right? When you come in summer of 09 and you realize you have hundreds of plants that have been snapped at the graft. there's a gentleman down the road planted, and he put those milk carton boxes around his planting. And as the ice came down, it accordioned those milk boxes and smashed them right down to the ground. It's as if you go around and you stomp on every milk box and plant, right? Subsequently every plant throughout your vineyard. So that was our 07-08 planting.
Just great timing, great timing. Tell me a little bit
But
about
it's farming.
Tell me about the process of learning that, of learning farming and of learning winemaking and sort of the steps along the way.
So when I was a kid, I worked for dairy farmers. So I was kind of adept as farm equipment, farm machinery. But it's different. It's very different. But here we planted grapes, there we planted corn. There, when I was a kid, we tended animals. Here I was adamantly against that. Family dog, family cat. The animals come to you. When you're out here, the animals basically come to you. You don't necessarily have to go out and find your animals, especially your cats. So they come to you. So I was also brought up as a sort of a do everything, but maybe don't do everything well sort of thing, right? As far as being handyman. So jack of all trades, master at nothing, I think it's the same, right? And that's really important to have here when you're on your own in a setup that we've established for ourselves here. So all that when I was a kid informed our success here. So I was able to jump on the tractor and get out there and start working in the fields, even though I hadn't done it in many years. Right, it sticks with you. Even the equipment was much more modern. When I was younger, John Deere and Kubota, for example, were just getting into compact four-wheel drive tractors. Right? Just to give you an idea, put things in perspective. And now the whole industry is just that. It's hard to find a two-wheel tractor anymore. So we planted the first 5.5 acres in 3 blocks, and then 5 acres after that. We're 10.5 total. The block names are, and this is fun, Mama's Ass is the one up on the road, and I'm going to say this right to the camera. I didn't name them. Talk to Mama about that. We have Mama's Ass on the road. We have Leonard's up on the north side of the driveway, which is my dad's name, Leonard's Block. And we did Leonard's Block for all the wrong reasons, and I don't know if you want to get into that, but that's why we named it. And then, just coming off of Mama's Ass, there's green space, and it's important to have green space. On the other side of that, there's a vineyard we called Third, because we're already out of names, right? We're on a 3rd block, and we couldn't, as a family, and we're a creative family, couldn't come up with another name. So Mama's Ass, Leonard's, and Third, right? And then we put this entire block, we called the Peace Block. So, and then the other block is the Riesling Block. We don't really have a name for that. So Mama's Ass, Third, Leonard's, Peace Block. That's how it goes. It just happens that way. Back to the cats. There's an interesting story. The first 4 cats that we got were dropped off on the road just in front of the neighbor's house down there, so right where the road comes out low. It was a family of 4 teenagers. There was Ash, Cole, Girl Stripes, and Boy Stripes. And Girl and Boy Stripes were identical, right? And that's pretty important. Not too long after that, Molly came to us, and she was a hand-me-down. She was 1.5 years when we got our first Molly the wine dog and our family dog, because she was with us for 14 years. She died at 15.5. So when we got Molly, and she showed up on the site here, she helped us with the deer, put in a mile-long fence, couldn't keep the deer out because they were in the habit of coming through, and that's, when deer are in the habit, they continue even if they're obstructed. So Molly came here 1.5 years, no more deer, right? At the same time, we had no more deer, so she knew exactly what to do. I never had to show her that. No more deer inside the fence the day Molly showed up. Ash and a striped cat also took off. Couldn't handle the dog. Stripe ended up down, one of the stripy cats ended up down there, and Ash ended up over on Windy Ridge. So we saw them eventually. They just couldn't handle Molly. And Molly's kind, right? They just couldn't handle it. So the first 4 cats, years later, when the stripy cat that stayed here, which we called Girl Stripes, had to go to the vet. So she had something wrong with her back. I don't know whether it was a pellet or whatever. Things happen to farm cats. Took her to the vet. Got word back from the vet that day. Now Jillian's older. She's, I don't know, in elementary school, and it was her cat, Girl Stripes, her cat. The vet said, "Hey, look, I just want to let you know that the cat's great, but it's boy stripes, not girl stripes." This is like 6, 7 years later, right? So I'm trying to tell that to your daughter, right? She got home from school and I said, "Hey, look, stripes okay, but it's boy stripes, not girl stripes." She panic cried instantly. What the heck? I said the cat's okay. So that happens here. We're on, I think we're on the 3rd generation of drop-off. So we picked up a litter down there, we picked up a litter at the top of the road, and picked up an individual cat at the end of the driveway. So we have a kind of a combination of what's left behind. One cat from up there, no cats from the original litter because they've all died or whatever. Just never know with cats. They've lived here for many years, but you just never know. And then the one at the end of the driveway is with us today. He's great. So we have 2 cats and 1 dog today. It's not a girl stripes, it's a boy stripes.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Devastating.
But we do fun things like that here. That's part of, in the early years, this tree right behind us was our summer school. So we did summer school with the kids for quite a few years. And summer school is a tricky thing to do with your kids because you're trying to catch them up for the year and put them in a place where you personally want them to be. But then you don't want to get them too far along because they'll be bored in the next school year. So it's real tricky to keep them engaged. One summer school year up in one of the towers over here, they did the 2 of them, and Jillian was younger at the time, but it stuck. They both took a songwriting camp right here on the property, and the woman who conducted that for us, her grandmother lived across the road. So it was a joint venture for her. She came up to visit her grandmother for a week and a half, and during that time, she taught our kids songwriting. So both of our kids have a copyrighted song. Colin's song is, he wrote a song called Calliope, which is copyrighted. It's a fun song, and it's out there on the web. And Jillian wrote a song called Started, and that's a fun. They're both great songs. And it came out of that class.
That's awesome.
Right here during the summertime. So as we blended work and family together, we got to do stuff like that. The Vineyard started producing in 2006. Very, very light harvest. So 5 acres. 5 acres in a format of, we're the least dense in a modern high density format. That's kind of what I chose to do here. And that puts us, depending on our cropping level, depending on our cluster weights, that puts us around 1.75 to 2 1/4 tons or more. We can actually yield more than that, but we usually crop it. We're doing that today. So we try and hit somewhere around 1.75 to 2 tons per acre. So if you say 2 tons, right, so it should have been 10 tons, you would think, off of your, but no, it doesn't work out that way. Your plants, as they mature, will produce more over time. So our very first harvest was 2.5 tons, I think, on 5 acres, right? 5 acres that would later on be cropped to 10 tons. Was putting out 2.5 tons.
That's amazing.
So it was a tough several years. 03 was a drought year. 04 to a certain extent was a pretty dry too, drier than usual. Plus we're a dry farm, so we had to go out with the wands. 05 we went out with the wands, but not as much. And then 06 I don't think we went out with the wands at all. It just took off. Of course on a dry farm too, you have to make sure all your greenery is cleared out. I brought in a farm management here to see if I wanted to hire them, and I'll never forget what he said when we looked at my vines and the weeds early on in Leonard's. We were standing over in Leonard's. The grasses and the weeds were higher than the vines themselves. And he said, "Hey, Mr. Styring, let me just tell you one thing. Agriculture waits for no one." You got to time it right. So I didn't hire him. He was awesome. I didn't hire his team, although he was awesome. But I did become a little more diligent about my farming practices. We still often run, like now that we're pretty mature here, we often run things, I don't want to say by the seat of our pants, but I want to say at the last minute, or low input. You know, so just by the nature of things, we're last minute low input farmers, and sometimes that puts me at odds with some of my colleagues. But that's what we do here, and that's part of the benefit of living on the estate where you're growing. You really can see, as opposed to being in another state or even in another city, you can really see what's going on with your vineyard and make some last minute decisions that aren't necessarily on a schedule. Right? So that's one thing that we've done here always. It does put us at risk every once in a while. Every once in a while I do have green flesh out there that's not protected from powdery mildew. And that gets me in trouble sometimes. 2006, light harvest. 7, we harvested before the rains, which was awesome because we had new vines. So the harvest came in before the rains. 7 is notorious for for that late rain that came in, much like 13 did. So 7, we harvested before the rains. 8 and 9, awesome harvest, more yield on the 5 acres. 10, the birds flew away with everything. No bird netting. 10 was also not a very good growing year for us. We had powdery mildew and we had grapes giving up. So, but the birds took everything at 21.5 bricks. So the birds took our grapes early, I think before they would even normally take them, and before we could use them. At 21.5 bricks, I'm just starting to get interested in those grapes. Usually it's the same with the birds, but the birds had nothing else to eat. You've probably already heard this. There was nothing else left for them to eat. They took 100% off the first 5.5 acres. So gone. All the summer's work, gone. All the summer's money, gone. Right? All the summer spraying and all the ag stuff, gone. 2011 was another cool harvest year. It's probably about as medium bodied as our Pinot gets here, my 2011s. Great tasting wine now. It's kind of a late bloomer in the bottle, I think. 7, 10, 11, to some extent 13. They do that. The cooler years tend to really come into their own a little later on in life. I think that's really becoming common knowledge around here. My 11s would prove that out. It's a wine that I made here that I personally didn't necessarily like at first, right? But we work with what we get, right? We work with the conditions of the year, and at a very basic level, that's what we work with. We express what happened that year. And that's the way 11 is, but man, to taste my 11s now, they're awesome. Wish I had all my 11s right now, because they're awesome right now. 12, an amazing year, right? So 12 was the first year for this to harvest, again, light tonnage. Back up one year, 11's the Riesling harvested first year. The Riesling 2011 was very Granny Smith green apple. Right now my Rieslings come through that and they go, I don't want to say they're tropical fruits, but they tend to ripen, especially over the past several years. We get them pretty ripe, not quite tropical fruits, but closer. We get them out of the green apple phase in white wine ripening, right? Or white grape ripening. But 2011 was distinctly Granny Smith green apple over there. Again, light harvest, right? Because they're new plants. And I can't remember what year, that might have been 2014. Didn't crop that 1 acre at all, produced 7 tons.
Wow.
7 tons of white wine grape off of 1 acre. So we crop it now and control it a little bit more. But up until 2014, I never really worried about the Riesling that much. We worked on it a lot, as we do all the other vines. But there's some things that we didn't do on the Riesling, like pay attention to cropping levels and stuff like that. Now I do. 7 tons was quite a bit.
That's a lot.
It was a nice problem to have too, because the Riesling was 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 have been phenomenal years, as you all know. So 11 first harvest over there, 12 first harvest over here, 13 21 and a half bricks again. It's a magic number. 21 and a half bricks of sugar, 22, maybe 22 and a half in some parts in the vineyard. And all the trucks are coming up on the ridge here to harvest everything. And it's like, whoa, what's going on? Well, it's, Oregon rain. You never know it's ever going to stop. Is it ever going to stop? You never know. So, again, 21 and a half bricks, 22. I'm not interested really yet. The style of our wine is kind of deep into harvest territory, which does, put my alcohol levels at around 14.7%. We're not necessarily 13.7%ers here. We're at 14%. That's where we like it, because we pick up some really nice flavors, we think, along the way. Weather permitting, we'd like to harvest as late as possible, even raisin flavors. The problem with that is the sugar levels get too high. So we are constrained there by balancing everything out, right? So that's 11. 12, awesome harvest year, a year that we remembered to get everything, later on, where we remembered to get everything graded or assessed by a third party. It was a year we clocked in that we know about. Previous years we may have done so, but they weren't graded or they weren't assessed by wine enthusiasts, for example. 12, we had the wines and we remembered to send them in. We got a 92, a 94, and a 96 in our 3 barrel blends of Pinot. That brings up another point. Through 2008, and starting with David, I used to source wine grape in, right? So we did that through 2008. 2008, and the source grapes, they were always our signature label, which is a white label on our crest. 2009, and the plants were large enough to harvest enough grapes for us here to use for all our blends. So as of 2009, it became a barrel blending challenge to get our signature label, which is a white label, and estate and our wit reserve, right? So the 2012 vintage year was the first year that we didn't have fruit coming in externally for the signature label. This says whimsy, but our signature label is white, much like this. So it was a year that we had the entire estate harvest in barrel, and it was a barrel blending exercise to get our signature, and then a little more exclusive, the estate, and a little more exclusive, our whip reserve barrels. So that's 12, 2013. We had a great summer, right? Great growing conditions. The late harvest rain, we're sitting at 21 to 22 bricks, 1 inch of rain, 2 inches of rain, 3 inches of rain, 4, 5, about 6.5 inches of rain here by the time we stopped. But we had a nice October and a somewhat warm and a dry October. So we harvested way, way late in 2013. In fact, we were barreling right up in, we actually ended up barreling after that open house season in November, right, Thanksgiving, because it was so late. But our harvest for that year came back into, it was corrected. The flavors came in. We came into about 24 bricks. In fact, our final blended sugar test on 2013 was 24.0 bricks of sugar. Not a tenth more and not a tenth less. It was 24.0 bricks. And we made a great wine from that in 2013, even going through 6.5 inches of rain, which, is a panic. It's always a panic to have that much rain. But October cooperated, and it worked for us. And it was a very, very different wine, but it was still a great wine. I think the signature 03 was another 92 rated wine. My signature 2013 was a 92 rated wine. And then, of course, 2014, 15, and 16, and 17. I don't think my notes are good enough to distinguish those years because they've just been such great years. And we're pouring 14 and 15s. Now, 14, the signature is a 93 rated wine. I believe my estate and wit are be a higher rating. They're far more exclusive, right? But that was a year with Kelley and I forgot to turn in all three. We just turned in signature. And it happens that way when it's just the two of you. So when 2015 came along with Wine Enthusiasts, we turned in all three at the same time, got all three ratings back, because we're sort of getting our act together, although it may not happen the next year or the next year. And the 2015s, this is the estate. So the 2015 signature is a 93, estate's a 94, and the Whit Reserve was a 96.
Wow.
93, 4, and 6. So I bested the 12s by 1 point on signature, right? Signature was 92, 4, and 6, and 15 is 93, 4, and 6. We got an extra 1 point out of it, right? So that's great. That's 15. 16s are awesome. 17s, we just barreled off a pretty large barrel, bottled off a pretty large barrel set. So we're all excited about all the wine that we have to sell here for years to come, because we've had great weather.
Sure.
Lots of quantity, lots of quality. It's a good problem to have.
Sure.
You know, we'll see what happens with pricing, but
Tell me about learning winemaking with David, and sort of what you needed to know, maybe what surprised you about winemaking.
well, a couple of things surprised me along the way, and one here in the vineyard that shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Summer of 2004, the second summer of farming, I parked the tractor. I think it was right under that big tree over there to cool off, and I realized that the layout of the vineyard and the permanence of the vineyard was just that. I was not farming cabbage. I was not farming an annual crop. And now I just sit and think about that for a while. It's like, what have I done here last year, right? Did I do it right? We're not fixing it. This is it. It's it for what, 50 to 75 years. And it would make sense that I should have thought about that in advance. But I didn't. I thought about it in the summer of 2004, that I planted a crop that had a certain amount of permanence to it, and a high cost. That's part of why it's permanent, right? So that was one fun and interesting learning. Down at David's place, like I said, the time we had there was cut short. I would have stayed there a lot longer. And I loved my conversations with David in his office. I did a lot of things while I was there, working above and beyond maybe the call of duty, just to get involved in everything from the tasting room. I worked a tasting room once in a while with David or by myself, and worked on my wines and some of their other clients' wines. I also did plumbing for them. You know, I call that working for the state. I worked for the state, but I was happy to do it because it was a knowledge-rich environment, and everybody was getting something out of it, which was really great. It was a kind of a mutual. Everything was, we had mutually beneficial, you know, to both parties. And then, like I said, David died, so we had to move our stuff up here. Did our first bottling down there. The very first thing we bottled was our 2003 dessert wine. So I still make that dessert wine today. David was the first to show me the Bellissima bottle, which I love and hate. It's a bottle that we all, when we work with it, we all love it and we hate it. We love it because it presents our wines so beautifully and so differently. We hate it because it's top heavy. And wherever it goes, it has a domino effect that surrounds it. And it's tragic sometimes. That was our very first wine we ever bottled. I think it was dessert wine. So we usually land our dessert wine somewhere around anywhere from 10.5% to 13% alcohol and about 19% residual sugar. And then from there we bottled our first Whimsy Riesling, which I purchased from elsewhere in the valley. And then our red wines for 2003, again purchased elsewhere in the valley. 04, same way, purchased elsewhere in the valley. Some of the people, the vineyard owners that I was working with at the time, through David, are no longer with us today, namely Wirtz. I don't know if you've heard that name in the industry, Wirtz and Wirtz Vineyard. He was a character, right? David Wirtz was quite a character. One day I showed up, 2004, at his vineyard, and when I showed up with truck and trailer, David's, I was a transporter. I was a designated transporter of the day. Wirtz was in his cottage at his vineyard, just yelling so hard at somebody. I don't know who he was talking on the phone, but he was on the phone. I heard the phone slam down. I thought, wow, I hope he's gotten that all out of his system. Right? Next thing you know, I get out of the truck and he's right in my face. That's the kind of guy he was. He was one that you really had to sort of get to know. Anyway, he did release all his tension in that phone call. And I took the second half of all that release. And that was one of the things I very much do remember. And another fun thing that you learn early on, I don't know if you guys have seen it in your apprenticeships, and I tell this to my customers, I use it every day actually. You learn that dry is not zero. When a wine is dry, it's not at 0% RS. It's negative. That's fun too. That was a head scratcher. Probably should have known that in advance. Probably should have read that in a book. But I didn't. I learned that on the fly, and it was fun to learn that. Dry is negative. Depending on what your wine you're working with, could be negative. Let's say on average, negative 1.75, negative 2. Right? That's where these wines land. Somewhere this guy here is, depending on the acidity in the wine and how it tastes on our palate, we're at 1% to 1.5% RS, right? But that's not coming from zero. And I talk to my customers about this all the time. It's actually coming from, the potential of having negative 1.5% residual sugar, right? So let's see. Bought. Early on, this is back in 03, used David's equipment. 04, I started using my equipment down there. So I started buying equipment in, but using it in Laurel Ridge. So the equipment story is very interesting. The very first press we bought, which is still the press I'm using today, was an old press that Josh Bergstrom used. So it's kind of like a hobby press. And we've pressed out, in any given year, we've pressed out dozens and dozens and dozens of barrels with that little press. When I asked Josh if I could buy that press used from him, he had to ask his dad. Because his dad was part of the company, right? So they had to get it cleared through the board, which was, I think, Dad and Mom at the time. And then I brought it up here, first at Laurel Ridge. We used it there because it was easier to use and easier to keep clean over the large equipment they had there. So I started learning how to use it down there, brought that expertise up here, and just kept it going. I've looked at bigger presses since, and I haven't really used ones, and I haven't liked what I've seen, so I stay on my press. I bet we're the fastest in the valley. I'm the fastest. I usually have help. I usually have a volunteer that helps me, and together, we're the fastest in the valley to run that small little press that we run. But through that, we get really gently pressed wines, and it's a piece of equipment that I'll have to swap out someday. But right now, I think it's really a key component to the beauty that's found in our Pinot, for sure.
What is it you hope people take away from your wines? What is it you're trying to present through your wine?
Well, some of the things that we try to present here, we are, as Kelley mentioned earlier, we're a family operation. Although I would never put that on as part of the name of our place, because that has a certain connotation. So we're a family operation that seeks to capture the character of any given harvest year at this facility year over year. And I do find myself at times in discussions with our clients or our customers about the difference between character and consistency, right? So we consistently look to achieve the best wine we possibly can produce in any given vintage year, but we also put a very, very high regard on the character of that year. So there's a lot of things that we don't do to make sure our wine might be the exact same from year to year. We let them be different. We let them have the character of the year from year to year. So the processing of our wine, the actual making the wine, is it's very minimally hands-on. It's surprising how little hands-on it is. I'm not saying it's easy. when we do the hands-on, it's hard work. And it does take quite a bit of skill. But at the same time, we kind of know where the limits are to make sure we don't step over to go for consistency year over year, right? We do want to make great wines year over year, but we want the wine to express the character of the year. Like, for example, 2013. 2013, stressful. We probably weren't going to do anything else because the sugar levels were low, and I didn't want to add stuff that I didn't want to add, right? So you just let it go and you roll the dice. And Kelley would say, look, it's going to hurt. It's not going to kill us, right? If that 5 acres goes upside down or if the birds, it's going to hurt, but it's not going to kill us. We're about making the best we can make for the year. And you're not going to harvest those grapes unless you're confident you can make the best you can make for that year. So we roll the dice and we go into the rain, for example, right? Or the birds, that's different. Can't really compare the two. But that's the decision we make year over year if there's rain present. We don't pick at 21.5. We wait and see what we get, right? 2017, I didn't pick the Riesling because I was really looking to get some advanced sugars and some botrytis in the Riesling. Because in 2013, that rainy year, maybe not the best for the Pinot out here, although we did pick 24.0 brooks of sugar. It was awesome for the Riesling. 100% botrytis, the best dessert wine money can buy. Really great. And we're conflicted that way, right? Every year we're conflicted. 2017, I was trying to duplicate 2013 by getting more botrytis for my dessert wine production. Didn't get it. 2015 tried to do the same thing. Didn't get it. 2015 we harvested wine for the dessert. We don't have that bottle here for our afterglow dessert wine. And we get about 20% botrytis, let's say, from 15. 17, all we got was a reduction in sugars. So what do you do when you pick 18 bricks of sugar? It goes to sparkling wine. We have an awesome sparkling Riesling. But you react that way, right? You react, and if you're faced with a certain set of challenges, we always try and divert or change or do something different to do the best that year with the character that's presented to us. The character potential that's going to be in that wine. So off the 1 acre of Riesling, we have now made the dessert wine. We make this Whimsy Riesling, which is 1.5% or 1.5% RS. And we have 5 bins of this beautiful Riesling sparkling wine that's just getting better and better every day. So it's all in temporary caps, waiting for us to finish it off.
Sure.
It's really cool.
Tell me about about your labels and how they fit with the name.
So, yeah, that's a really great question for Kelley in detail. But this one right here has an example of the old label in the background, which was 4 swords or a 4-leaf clover or 4 hearts. You can look at it different ways, right? 4 hearts, 4 swords, or a 4-leaf clover. That was a crest that we sort of made up. And we tasked a gentleman in Portland. He was a server. He was a server/bartender in a restaurant in Portland. He came out here with his, I think it was his girlfriend at the time, and wanted to be a graphic artist for him. So we tasked him to come up with a crest for us, and he did. And the way he did it was he just put a snowflake, right, where you fold up a piece of paper, then you start cutting the pieces of paper, then you open it up and see what you have. That's how he came up with that. And then Kelley finished the label off. He set the typeface for us and did the design in the background, and then she had to put the whole thing together. This is before we had our actual crest. So yeah, he just couldn't get it to the end game. But Kelley's got an industrial design background degree, so she could take that and bring it to fruition, which she did. 2006, we had our first harvest, as I mentioned, from our Pinot, which after around 16 to 18 months in barrel, it's around 2 to 3 calendar years before we're ready to sell that wine after we pick it. So somewhere around, let's just say 8 or 9, we were coming out with we were in need of a label for our premier estate harvest. At the same time we were in need, the Book of Styring came to us after 10 years of being on order, and in the Book of Styring had our original family crest. So it kind of came together right at the same time that we put our original family crest on the label. So as a nod to the designer crest, we put that in the background, put the original crest out front, and did that first on the labels. So I think it's 2011, we were transitioning from the old crest, 2011, 10, would have been 10 unless it was the Echo Grapes, but you'll see some of our bottles have the new logo on the front and then the old logo on the cork, because that's a new die set, right? It's another company to call. So we went a couple of years with a little bit of confusion on the inside of the bottle, but now that's all pretty much straightened out. And now what we're working to do is finally cut the designer crest away and go forth with the family crest, something like that. It's a little cleaner. But that crest has been part of the Steer family since, if I'm remembering correctly, somewhere around 1046 AD. So the name goes way back. Again, as I understand it, and Kelley can fill you in on all the Viking history. The name started with STYR, which is steer, as a Viking name. And then there was an offshoot back then, for some reason, I don't know. And that's where the ing was attached. So it was, as I understand it, Steer the Younger. So somewhere along the line, Steer the Younger decided to go up on his own and be a Styring.
Love it.
So that name goes way, way back. There are spin-offs from the name too. Various spin-offs. Most of them came about because they were just easier to spell or pronounce. This one's a very difficult one to pronounce. It wasn't necessarily our first choice to put on the bottle, but after exploring other choices and anticipating defending other choices in court, trademark-wise, we figured this is probably something that we could put on the bottle and never really have to go to court to defend. So that's why in the end we chose it. On the way out the driveway, if you look, one of the front runners was Bliss Wine Company, and Bliss became a cliche through the 2000s, and I'm glad we didn't use that. But it is on our gate. We had it put on the gate. So if you look at the gate on the way out, it says the white gate. It says Bliss on it. That's a nod to the original, some very early thinking. I called the gentleman who actually owned that trademark. He had a defunct wine company. I said, "How much do you want for Bliss?" He said, $9,000. So when you're new like this and you look at, $9,000 to purchase the rights to Bliss for wine, or the purchase of 3 tanks, what are you going to do? You've got to buy your 3 tanks. Those are, an example of some tough decision making early on. I don't know if that helps. The logo in it is I believe it's in its original form, and Kelley can pick this apart. My favorite is the bat on the logo, and that's basically harnessing the power of darkness and evil, or harnessing or engaging the power of chaos and darkness, for good or bad, I guess. Right?
It's pretty apt for winemaking, I suppose.
Right, but my parents were first generation here. Styrings. I've said this before and I've been corrected on this. The Viking Styring settled Sheffield, England. And this is where the correction is. Conquered, raped, and pillaged Sheffield, England, and then established themselves. So that's where the largest number of Styrings exist today, in Sheffield, England. I'm first generation. My parents are from Birmingham, England. Came over here in 1956. So that's kind of the history of the name. The naming conventions that you see on the bottle are mostly Kelley's. So we have whimsical names like Wit and Whimsy, Wit and Whimsy, Reckless, Shameless, Afterglow. I got a call yesterday from a beer company, New Holland Brewery. They wanted to talk about Afterglow. They trademarked it in May 21st, 2019, we trademarked this our Afterglow, which is our dessert wine, years ago for wine. And I think he's in his CYA, cover his tracks mode, and he gave me a call. And he said, hey, we're in the process of trademarking Afterglow for beer. We'd like to have a letter from you guys that say you don't mind doing that. Because your wine, we're beer, it's different, but it's similar. And I said to the gentleman in New Holland, I said, New Holland Brewery, the director or whatever, I said, hey, as far as I can see, your trademark has already gone live. So you don't need a letter from me, you're live. Oh, really? When you're a small producer, you really have to know kind of everything, right? These larger companies, this director, I ended up trying to tell him how to research his own trademark that he's calling me about. Meanwhile, I'm not particularly happy that he's using Afterglow for beer, but there's nothing I'm going to do about it because that's the way it is in business, right? So that's one of Kelley's names. That's presented some very interesting conversations at the register at checkout.
I can only imagine.
One woman come in and she said, wow, this is back when our bottle sold for $30. She said, wow, if I thought I could purchase an Afterglow for $30, I would have been here years ago. So it has a certain meaning to it, right? And that's what Kelley's looking for. She's looking for reactions like that. And we do often get them.
I can imagine.
I think she was looking to pull me in possibly for the tour.
Okay.
Any other?
Can I ask you just one more question and we'll let you go? Curious about sort of what you've seen in the industry since you became part of it, the changes you've seen in the area and sort of in Oregon wine in general.
I think the changes have all been very, very positive. From our standpoint, we arrived on the scene in 2003, and we were the very first winery on Ribbon Ridge Road. Not on the ridge, but on this road. We were the very first winery here. Technically speaking, I think there was the presence of a winery that had gone defunct down the road, and that little building where it was is now in a pole barn. Now has a new building wrapped around it. But we were the first winery that was a going concern that was established up here on the road. And look what's happened around us. It's just been a wonderful thing. And the people that have come in, the people that we've met, the people that have come to see us before they put their wineries together have been great. We have one example where there's a couple that came here that were inspired by our story. And they came and told us that. We are inspired by your story, so we're quitting our jobs and we're coming here to Oregon too, just like you did.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, that's a burden, right? Just like you did. Oh my goodness. Hope it works out for you. They're down the road. So, I don't know. So give me the facets.
Just sort of curious what you've seen in the area, but also just sort of in Oregon wine in general, like what the industry looks like now.
The cool thing about Oregon wine is, I think, especially in these past several years, I think it's spectacular. Like, I don't know if a tourist would come through our facility and I wouldn't tell them, have a great weekend, because there's amazing wine here to taste, right? And I mentioned earlier on in the interview that we don't get out enough. Sometimes we have to kind of make ourselves. Like every other weekend, we're going to go taste somewhere, just to taste and see what else is going on. When we do that, and then it lasts for like a couple of weekends, then we can't do it anymore, right? And then we go a couple of years where we can't even start that anymore. And, time flies by. But when we do it, we're just always so amazed of all the great wines and how, for the most part, the discipline is still here. I get a little frustrated when I see bottomland planted myself, because when we came here at this site, we had a strict set of guidelines, very strict discipline that we adhered to. For the most part, the Riesling has a little bit of a northern roll to it. It's a little bit of a compromise over there. But, when I see non-sloping bottomland being harvested, I might wonder, what might happen down the road when that wine starts getting made and sold. But it's also going different places, right? we're a very exclusive, kind of a high-end artisan wine here. So this has to be right, in order to keep our barrel prices high. We're not necessarily going to a Costco or a store like that. So you have to allow that to happen too, because that gets Oregon Pinot out there, and it gets a larger number of people sampling Oregon Pinots, and then buying up, right, or becoming an Oregon tourist. We see a lot of people in this area in the summertime from Georgia, Florida, Texas, right? So I'm beginning to wonder if we have more, a little like we were. We were responding to the heat, and we had 38 degrees of over 100 degrees, 38 days of over 100 degrees in Texas during the last year we were there, and that's not gotten any better, right? We've gotten warmer here. I can tell you that our harvest is no longer October 10th. It's more like September 20th, right? So it's happening, and I think we're seeing some of that coming to Oregon. We're seeing people that are looking more and more at Oregon to escape some of the heat in their current situation and do what we've done, or even bring more money to Oregon, do it in a bigger way, right? So it's all been really positive. The county's been great to work with. The state's been great to work with. I never mind a call if I get one, or a call to the OLCC. Love it. The kids have had a great time here. They've taken our experiment, and they've gone on to top 10 schools, top 15 schools. But meanwhile, they participated while they were here too. So Colin went out and got donations for, and actually managed the project of installing, I think he's at a 5 gigawatt solar installation.
Cool.
Down in Newburgh, where the 39 cent per kilowatt hour from Portland Gas and Electric goes directly to YCAP. YCAP gets a check every month because my son, for his senior thesis at his high school, decided to raise money and take advantage of the PGE plan where they pay out per kilowatt hour.
That's awesome.
So he went around and got donations for an installation, talked to YCAP, they put it in Newburgh. Next thing you know, PGE is under contract to deliver 39 cents a kilowatt hour to YCAP for 15 years. 39 cents a kilowatt hour, 39 cents is one meal. So for every kilowatt that solar panel generates, it generates one meal through YCAP.
That's awesome.
So the kids have given back too. Jillian did an awesome study for her thesis. She went out and studied for a year and a half homeless youth in Portland on the streets with homeless youth to try and determine where she can help, or how the state can help, or how those who are helping the homeless youth of Portland could help more. That's difficult.
Yeah.
Really difficult, because those senators that are charged with helping homeless youth, they don't want to talk with you. They will not talk with you. So if you want to do that research, you got to go and get on the street and carry the scale on your back. If you want to know how much they weigh, on average, you got to carry the scale on your back. So she did that. She contributed that way too. So, and I see that not just with us. I see that in other ways. Other wineries that are being established both in and out of state, they make significant contributions back to the economy. And for every tourist that we bring in here, significant contributions back to the economy.
Sure.
You meet great people like Amity, right?
Myron.
The people who started Amity, great people. He's awesome, right? I sat in meetings with him, and he's sort of like a conundrum of greatness, right? It's a really awesome person to meet. Harry and Henry Peterson's the same way. Brickhouse, Doug Tennell's the same way. Beaufrere. I think we say it on our bottle. We stand on the shoulders of greatness, and we mean it, right? The very first meeting I had here in 2003 or 4, that tightly knit group around me, which was, I think, 3, 5 winemakers, big names wanted to see what I was doing up here. So all of a sudden, the River Ridge Growers Group was formed. Had 4 or 5 people in it, right? Now it's large.
A long time ago.
Right now, it takes a pretty big building to fit us all in. But when I first got here, it was basically the other 4 or 5 guys trying to figure out what I was doing up here.
Sure.
The River Ridge Growers Group. But I found myself in a meeting with Mike Edsel and Harry Nedry and Doug Tunnell.
Yeah.
Wow, how do I get to be here in this type of meeting with them? So we certainly do stand on the shoulder of greatness. You know, we've always treated it that way. You know, we always find that we're very grateful to be here and to be able to do what we've done.
Sure. So tell me, in your opinion, what are the challenges of being like a small boutique kind of high-end winery? What are the challenges you guys have faced here?
Wow, that's such a great question. Challenges in a lot, kind of run the gamut of what a small business would face, but then it's overlaid with the aspects of being in a rural location. So it can be challenging to staff when you're only open by appointment and on Saturdays. How do you find great people that want to do that? How do you find great people that want to drive 10 miles out of Newburgh to do that, right? So I think that's always been a challenge. Driving traffic to your unique location when there's so much great wine out here and there's so many great experiences to be had. I mean, the whole valley is incredibly beautiful. And so how do you stand out in that sea of greatness in a way, right? It's not just a sea of sameness, it's a sea of greatness. And so how do you be distinctive? When we first moved here, we were young family, quits their job, sells it all, moves across the country, and so we had a story. That narrative is easily repeated 100 times over as the industry has grown from 100 when we started to 700 or more now in the valley. So that's not a unique narrative anymore. So then the next thing that I did was I wrapped our communication around our chocolate lab, Molly the Wine Dog. So Molly the Wine Dog became a fixture she has 4,000 followers on Twitter. She became she was our spokesdog and social media calendar girl. Well, then in 2018, our dog died. Then what do you do when Orville Redenbacher dies? What do you do? So I think that's a continuous challenge that we're facing even today.
Tell me about selling wine in this kind of suddenly very crowded marketplace and how you try to set yourself apart.
Yeah. I think there are a couple of things that do set us apart. One is that it's authentically crafted from the soil to the glass here on site. And so I think our AVA is unique. When we taste wine at other places and they feature Ribbon Ridge, we can always pick it out because our palate is kind of dialed into it. So I think that's one piece of it, is that it's authentic, handcrafted, family farm. And what that does is that means each vintage year is different. It doesn't taste the same. If you are a large operation and you have a lot of wholesale business, then you kind of have to meet the expectation that you've set based on prior vintages, that things are going to be somewhat the same every year. We don't have to do that. He has complete freedom to do what he wants, especially with the Pinot Noir. That's such a variable grape, by the weather, by the barrel choices, by the moment that he decides to bottle it, the way that he blends the different barrels together. So he has a lot of control in the craft of that that is meaningful. It's hard though in this business though to say I'm handcrafted. Everybody can say that. Anybody can say that, right? So I think the other proof point is that we don't sell very much wine that people haven't tasted. So you can actually come here and taste it. And so whether you want to engage in the story of handcrafted before you taste it or not, you get to taste it before. And the other thing that I think works in our favor is variety. So we make dry whites. We make classic Pinots and intense Pinots. So we have a variation even in the Pinot Noir set. He makes Cabernet Sauvignon. He makes Petit Verdot. He makes a Syrah Port style. He makes a white Riesling. He makes a white Pinot. So the fact that he's endeavored, and I completely disagreed with that in the early days. I said, you're in Pinot Noir country. You need to make world-class Pinot. That's what people come here for. And he goes, but we need variety. I want to make Cabernet. I don't know if he told you that, but he said, when he was making the cab. So he brought in some fruit and make it here exactly the same way he makes the Pinot. I said, what are you making a cab for? He said, it's just going to add variety to the tasting, it'll be a lot of fun. And he said, did he tell you this story already? He said, this is the best wine I've ever made. And I was like, then I'm really mad because Pinot Noir needs to be the best wine you've ever made. He said, this is the best wine I've ever made. I want to call it Zenith. I said, well, that's awesome, but we're going to call it Shameless because you're a shameless Pinot guy making a cab. Like, what are you doing? And so that's how that wine got its name, was this little like pillow talk argument. Right? It was a friendly argument. We argue friendly most of the time. So anyway, I think that variety gives us the opportunity to say that when you visit Styring, there's something for everyone in your group. Mm-hmm. If you just want to taste whites, we have 3 whites. And we're small, we're nano in scale. To have 3 white wines for you is kind of amazing. Mm-hmm. We've got big, bold reds if that's what you enjoy. We've even got some Pinot Noir that are going to take you close to that space. Mm-hmm. He created a blend, which he called Fearless. He probably didn't talk about that either, right? Okay, so Fearless is a blend of Pinot Noir and Petit Verdot. And blending Pinot Noir is verboten in the industry. It's definitely frowned upon because if you're heavy-handed with that, you strip it of all its essential Pinotness, and then it's just a muck. It doesn't do anything. But he did it in such a way, again by taste, that it's just the right amount, and it's a gorgeous wine. And we said, okay, we have to call it Fearless because of the fact that you're doing this. And we brought out the bats a little more prominently in a gargoyle kind of on the bottle, like Fearless. And it's an amazing wine. So anyway, the short answer to your question is the variety works hard for us now, I think.
Speaking of those labels, we asked about the labels, and he gave us kind of the short story, but I'm curious the longer story about the labels and
the
label design, and especially the bats, which he had mentioned.
So the crest that we use is the authentic Styring family crest. It dates about the year 1100. The history is kind of fuzzy because people didn't write things down very well back then. When William the Conqueror was, killing everyone in England, they didn't have time to write things down. So his family heritage, though, is Viking via York, England. Mm-hmm. So the Viking invasions of England started on Lindisfarne Island around the year 900. His people came from Denmark and Sweden were kind of one country at that time. They didn't separate, really. They didn't separate the way we do today, countries. And so a Viking family came over and took York, and they held from York to Sheffield, which is about a 50-mile valley, for almost roughly 400 years. So they lost their family wealth when Henry VII, the Tudor, from the south of England, defeated Richard III, who was a Yorkist, and being a Yorkist means you're from the north, you're from York. So the whole Viking area of the north is very much his family history. So when we visit Sheffield, England, we don't have to pronounce or spell our last name. There are enough Styrings there. The former mayor was a Styring, and all the family papers are in the library there. You can go to the rare books collection and read the family history. And so that's a lot of fun. The Ing means the younger part of the family. And there was as history developed, people required first and last names to distinguish one person from another. So at one time you could just be John, and then your son would be John's son, Johnson, and then names grew from there, right? But at some point people needed first and last names. And so there was a William Styre and the senior, a grandfather, and then William Styre, the younger, who changed his name to Styring, which means the younger. So that branch of the family became his branch of the family. What else can I tell you? Well, the only other fun fact is, if you've ever watched the Vikings on the History Channel, Steve's a direct male descendant of Ragnar Lodbrok through Bjorn, who is his first son. So awesome. Through Bjorn came the family members that took York, and they do a reasonably good job of representing the family in that show. I mean, they were not necessarily good guys, and that's part of what the bat is. So the bat symbolizes chaos and darkness. They weren't good guys. They smote a lot of people. They pillaged and whatnot, I'm sure. That's why they came to England. They couldn't grow food, and so they came to England because it was a fertile land and they could actually live there. So first they stole everything, and then they decided that the land was really what was valuable. The black bars, I guess here they're represented in white in reverse, or black here, represented that at some point in that 400-year history, a king denoted their, I don't know, clan, I don't know what you would call it, their family, as having won 3 significant battles. So each of those, it's called a band, it's awarded by the king. The arrows suggest that they were probably English longbowmen. The English longbow was the kind of imperial feature of war for a long time. It's how they defeated the French at Agincourt and many other battles. Because the longbowmen began training at about age 10, but they weren't actually allowed to be a part of the army until they were about 18. And they could shoot 60 arrows a minute, so roughly 1 arrow a second, because they used their body to aim. They didn't actually aim. They had, like when our kids play guitar, they have finger memory. They memorize thousands of notes in classical guitar. It's similar in that they have this body memory of how to shoot the longbow. So the arrows suggest that they led archers. I mean, we don't know a lot about that history specifically. But in 1952, there was a book published about the family history where most of this information comes from. It's called Earls Without Coronets, which means kings without crowns, basically, because they lost all their wealth. And then we have a very elaborate family tree that was delivered to us by a distant relative. And that's how, when I was watching the Vikings just for fun, I started hearing all these names. I went, wait a minute. And I go running across the living room. It's this huge chart in the living room of the many, many generations. And I'm like, hey. And then you can see where the lies are in the show, too, which is kind of fun. Yeah.
Well, that is awesome.
So that's the long, short story of the family history.
Love it. So what's in the future here at Styring? What are you guys looking at as you look ahead?
Such a great question. So when we first started, I think the objective was to create this family life that was, rich and beautiful and artistic, and family, be with our kids and whatnot. And so that led us to, we're only open by appointment, because I don't want a lot of strangers like rolling up to my house in the middle of the day, right? So now that the kids are grown and on their own, we can be open a little more often. So we're experimenting with some Saturday hours, and if I can staff it, maybe Sunday hours, but again, that's challenging. And then now finally a proper tasting room. So it's a little bit hard to manage tastings in a winemaking space because of temperature, because of odors, because there's lots of problems with what we've been doing for the past 10 years in the party barn where we've been pouring. So now that we have a proper tasting room, I think we'll be open more often. We built everything to scale us from the 1,500 cases that we make today to about 3,500 maximum. 3,500 is kind of a break point in the economics of a winery, where you have to add a lot more staff, right? 3,500 would still be pretty hard the way we're doing it now, but it could be done. So we kind of said maybe that's how we scale everything at this point. And we've made some major improvements in the cellar. When we built the tasting room, there's also a cellar underneath. And what that's enabled us to do, now that we don't have teenagers to run up and down ladders to service stacked barrels, now all the barrels are on one level. So as we're aging, we're kind of getting a grip on what are the parts that we can continue to do, what are the parts where we're going to need some help. I would envision that he'll take on an apprentice himself someday and pass that legacy forward. I would hope, but we'll have to wait and see.
And what are you proudest of as you look back on your wine journey here?
Oh gosh, there's so much that I'm proud of. I think I'm proud of the fact that we're self-funded. I think the fact that we've built it, that we've done this ourselves without the complexity of investors and bank loans and large financials. So I'm proud of the finances of it, that it sustains itself, and that we've been able to invest everything we make back into growing it, and that our customers have helped us with that. So we have year-over-year customers that come back and they can kind of see what their support does, and I think that's huge. And that connection with the people who've been with us the whole time, I think, is huge. I'm so proud that he was able to come into a craft from technology. So from a very rational, he's a scientist, this is what he does. And now he's in this craft, in this place where you have to trust your palate, and you have to be patient in so many ways. And I'm proud of the fact that he was able to do that and get recognition for the wines. So it's not just that we love them. It's good to have external validation. The customers who taste the wine and purchase it, but also the fact that he won a gold medal in his first Pinot vintage, okay? And that he's scored over 90 on all of his Pinots for at least 5 years. And so I think that little bit of external validation is satisfying as well, because I'm so proud of what he does. It's one thing for your wife to be proud of you, but it's another for other people to get it too, and kind of and then, you know, that kind of plays into the community that we built with our customers, I think, as well. So when people come here, they feel like they're a part of what we're doing here, and they are. You know, they're genuinely part of the conversation. They're part of the experience. And I personally think that most people that purchase wine aren't actually buying wine per se. They're purchasing a token of the experience that they had. And when they go home and they share that wine with someone, they'll say, I went to this amazing place. I met these really interesting people who did this crazy thing. And now we're going to drink what they did. And guess what? It actually tastes good. You know? In fact, it tastes great. And so I think when you get to that level of narrative, that's super satisfying.
So the last question I have for you today is one that we usually ask couples together, but since I just have you, I'll ask you. You mentioned that before you got into the business that you knew you had worked well together, and that was one of the reasons you thought you could do this. So what is the secret to a successful marriage in the wine industry?
That's such a great question. Such a great question. So we met at work. I don't know if he told you any of that. So we worked at NASA. We worked at Mission Control in Houston, and his cubicle was the cubicle next to mine. And he had a policy about not dating people at work, and so I harassed him for about 6 weeks and I threw paper clips over the cube. Like, it was a real pain. So I think the fact that we grew up together, because we were 23 when we met. I think the fact that we have that history together is a big part of it, and then that our goals are aligned for the most part. And when they're not, you know, we have to hash it out. And then the third thing is, I think we push each other. Like, he pushes. He's really been the leader in most of the building around here and the expansion of space and the investment in things. And we're going to plant more acres. And we're going to build this building. And I'm always like, oh, are we really going to do that? And then I'm the one who says, and we're going to have a grand opening, and we're going to go on television, and he's like, oh, I don't really want to do that. And so I think we have different pedals that we push and push each other to grow a little bit. And that causes tension, but then we can usually work through, and we work through that, just like other people do. You know, so I think having common goals and then pushing each other, I think, is the good. And then we just have history of working together. You know, because we worked together and then we didn't work together, and we've had several small businesses that we've opened and closed along the way, along that journey when we were in our 20s. And so we had that early experience that gave us confidence that we could do this. This has been longer and harder, and honestly, raising kids together is harder than running a business together, I think, because there's more to disagree on. You know, running the business together, it's gone pretty well.
Well, I know I said that was the last question, but you talking about meeting at NASA Mission Control kind of raises another question.
Yeah, sorry about that.
It's okay.
I did kind of drop that.
How did you both get to NASA Mission Control?
So he was an electrical engineering student at Arizona State University, and so his first job out of school was a reliability engineer at Mission Control. And then about a year later, I graduated with a degree in industrial design from the University of the Arts, Philadelphia. And there was a design team there that we were working in communications design. And so the lead designer was an alum from my school who I contacted, and so then I got a job. So I came from Philadelphia and he came from Arizona, and we met in Houston. And it was just random that our cubes were next to each other, that we were in the same group in Building 30, which is where Mission Control happens. And my father worked for NASA during the Apollo missions, so I wanted to do that. And I think he had a variety of offers, and that one was the most interesting. one that he had. So that's where we met.
Excellent.
Yeah. Weird, huh?
It's a pretty great. It's a pretty great
I think
meeting
I need a
story.
t-shirt that says I met my husband at Mission Control. That'd be like a great t-shirt.
Exactly.
It's kind of funny. So, well, thanks for coming out.
Yeah.
Any additional
Thank-
questions? You guys good?
Yeah.